What's up, tea people? This is Denny.
This is James from TeaDB, bringing you episode number 209. So, what do we got today?
We got some old poop.
Yep.
What a surprise.
From 2007.
Yep.
Kuzhushan. So, that is the mountain. This is Xizihao. So, thank you to Emmett for sending us this samplage.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Emmett. You're a rock star. We love you.
And here we go.
Boom.
So, aged in Taiwan. This is from one of those Taiwan boutique producers. We'll give this a rinse.
And when I saw James departiculating, as they would say to a chicken, this tea, one thing that he was doing is leaving in 1 to 2 big pieces. Really nice sweetness in the aroma. 1 to 2 big pieces, and then the third piece that he had, he really worked all the way down. And so, James, you want to speak to that a little bit? I know some of our older, our diehard fans will know what's up, but
in general, it's just a bad idea to be brewing. Just like, let's say you have a cake, you break off one huge chunk,
right,
but it's the right gram amount that you want to be brewing.
Right.
Don't brew it like that.
Yep.
Break it up into different pieces. Otherwise, you want it. This just helps to make it brew out more evenly. The chunks are nice and stuff for pictures, but for practical purposes, you want to break the tea down.
100%.
You could break it down even further from where I broke it down, or you could break it a little bit less. Breaking it down more will make it just brew out a little bit faster, which is totally fine as well.
Right. Yeah. And you might not need 2 rinses if you have it completely broken up. You might only need 1. Because the tea will be able to, surface area-wise, will just be more exposed.
Right.
So
right.
Some other things that are small that keep in mind, but overall, it's a good idea to have a good balance.
Yep. All right, we are drinking this.
Let's do it.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Yeah. This has that really wonderful, made to be drank young sweetness, like a young raw that's been kind of created to be drank within a year. It's got those sorts of notes on it, and I'm looking forward to more steepings because already it's tasting great. I think there's going to be a lot of complexity that's going to come from the age on this. So, but that palate, those flavor notes rather, it's a little bit surprising to me on something that's this old.
And take another smell of this too. I'm getting
really nice sweetness.
It's like sort of a. It's still pretty light, so it's sort of creamy, ripe stone fruits. It's sort of what I'm getting so far.
Yeah, fruity. Yum. Yep. And I'm used to some of these develop that sort of tomato vine greenness.
So it's sort of like a earthier.
Yeah, some of these develop that. This doesn't seem to have that as much. It seems to maybe there's just sort of thinking of it. So maybe there's something in my mind there, but on my palate. But much more of a sweet, not quite refreshing, but on the side of in the mud versus in the clouds, kind of more of a crisp lightness to it so far. The liqueur, though, is changing dramatically.
Yep. Getting darker and darker.
You can expect to see experience an evolution of taste there. So Let's give it a shot.
Cheers, guys.
Salud. Good on the body. It's a little bit viscosity-wise. It's not the thickest tea.
Certainly not yet. And I'm trying to figure out whether I should be pushing this more. I'm getting maybe hints of leather in addition to go with sort of that fruit that I was getting earlier.
I'm not sure you should push it more because from a liqueur perspective,
it seems
it's going to be, I think the next steeping is going to be pretty freaking
it seems
gnarly.
like it's getting stronger and stronger. Probably that initial infusion, it could have been the previous episode we were talking about just watching leaves expand and taking up the brewing device. We could see that they've
100%.
completely taken over there.
I do agree though. It has like there's plenty of flavor going on, but it is light.
Yeah. Are you getting much of the sort of raw pu'erh, as you described it, sort of gasoline off of this?
Not as much as I would have expected. It's definitely not like a young raw where. So there's a lot of variance, but at least with like kind of lesser quality young raws that are meant to be aged, they are tasting like the gas station. But this one doesn't have as much of that at all.
Yeah,
actually.
And some people have wondered sort of towards Denny's description of like a gasoline station. I think an alternative sort of description could be sort of just like young, pungent,
peaty, earthy,
green flavors.
Yeah. So it's not
like strong and green and bitter.
Yeah, like the
smoky.
Exactly. The what I'm talking about is that earthy, smoky, soil flavor that you get from Scotch, okay, or like from some Malbecs. So it's not bad. It's just a description.
Yeah.
Right? Like some people love it too.
Yeah.
But the reason we talk about it is because it can be it's sort of categorically a very aggressive flavor in early aged young pu'erhs.
Yeah.
So that's why we bring it up.
Yeah. And so next time you guys are at a gas station, make sure that you get up real close to that pump, take a quick smelter delta, and you guys can see, then bring your pu'erh out that you're carrying with you, of course.
Right.
And
do
you
some
can
taste testing.
You can take some. Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do
that. Yeah, don't take our medical advice seriously.
Legally speaking, I don't want that to happen. All right. Yeah. So cheers. Getting into more of that.
More flavor.
Yeah, more of that, like, not quite sour, but tartness. A little bit more of that vine thing going on. Yeah. Losing a little bit of the sweetness, I think. Or maybe it's being overshadowed a little bit by some other flavors going on. But still not, again, so back to the gasoline. It's not that sort of oppressive gasoline-iness at all. Good flavor. And good energy too.
I would say that the flavor is sort of like a mix of fruits and maybe like slightly decomposed fermented fruits. It's not quite like what you would taste as far as like fresh fruits go, but there's definitely some fermented flavor within it.
A little bit more on the mouth, a little bit more tannin. It's not biting per se, but you'll, in the same way that you're going to be sort of having that, getting the poo burps, chalky mouthfeel, kind of like you're massaging. If you're like a dog, you're doing the whole peanut butter thing. You ever want a good time, feed your dog some peanut butter and see what happens. Or better yet, if you put a little bit on their nose, endless entertainment.
You've never done this before, of course.
Not approved by PETA. Sorry.
That's true.
Look at the liqueur now. Wow.
Yeah. Let's take another smell of this. Interesting. That's not what I expected.
Yeah.
Sort of getting like...
It's interesting. I think it smells more earthy than like a little bit more of like the sort of brandy.
Yeah, I'm getting more oaty, grainy notes to that aroma. Which is sort of interesting.
So what...
This is
Fifth?
four.
Fifth?
Four.
Fourth?
And then 5 is over there.
All right. Cheers. Getting some more sweetness again, though.
I'm getting sort of that that tart graininess to this too. It's quite dynamic, I gotta say. It's changed a bit.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Which is nice. It's one of the fun things about drinking tea, y'all. So get into it. And this is the kind of tea that, it'll steady out into kind of coming back to a more classic flavor profile, steeping sort of 8 onward, depending. But this is the kind of tea that I would suspect you can probably brew out 12 times or so, having it, work out really well for you.
Yeah, it's going pretty strong so far.
And have you reheated the water? I haven't noticed.
I did once, just a couple of infusions ago. So.
Yeah. Salute.
It's more pungent, if anything. I feel like this infusion is particularly not sweet.
Yeah, it's a strong, more tannin.
Any gasoline?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I mean...
So, I agree with you. I think it's strong in sort of a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the sort of high earlier notes that we were tasting that were, I was saying, kind of indicative of a young raw, pretty much gone. And now there's a residual sort of sweetness that I'm experiencing, not super down here, but I'm kind of in my upper chest a little bit, tasting it.
Some good sweetness lingering in the throat too.
Mm-hmm. It's not. So when you're saying strong, how would you go into depth on that, James? What does that mean?
I guess in this case it means that it's got some substance to it. Mm-hmm. It's got it's not particularly sweet, but it's got body. It's sort of got like a strong, pungent graininess to it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bit of bitterness in it, perhaps more so than previous deeps. Mm-hmm. It's not particularly astringent, but I don't know. It's sort of just really strong in that character of sort of pungent graininess, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just piggybacking on that, the strength of these sorts of teas at this point in the drinking process is kind of like there's a sort of like one or two flavors that are just sort of really pushing forward for a couple of steeps, and then those will sort of settle back down, and then other notes will come back out as well.
Yep.
So,
and I think that's one of the fun parts, as you said earlier, of sort of just the way we do tea with like these smaller vessels and stuff. If you were to brew the same amount of leaf and do it in some sort of infuser, and go for maybe 3 infusions, you'd get a very different profile. Like whereas we're getting sort of like these different flavors coming in and out. Each one.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah,
don't do that.
Don't
do that. Sorry.
Well, don't do it for this tea. Like stuff like maybe like the Dong Ding we did last time, I think would do better.
Yeah. Maybe those Darjeeling teas.
Yeah.
Might do well with that. But yeah. Do this right.
Denny
by
is
the way,
offended by.
I am a little offended. You don't need a guy. Get 2 mugs and a fork. It's not like it's a big deal, y'all. Just and then
this is a good name of a podcast. 2 mugs and a fork. New TeaDB.
Totally. But seriously, like you don't have some limiting belief or limitation on your tea experience because you don't have a gaiwan. Just make it work. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do when I'm traveling abroad. If I'm not bringing a gaiwan with me, which I'll do sometimes, then I just have 2 mugs and a fork, and it still tastes freaking delicious. So.
And I'll tell you guys something. Gaiwans are intended to be cheap. They're not intended to be like $100 brewing devices.
Right.
Like these were like $5 or $6.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a gaiwan should be. It's meant to be basic. If you break it, who cares? You buy another one.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
No big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, not to offend any of those folks out there who want to get into the teaware side of things, totally cool. But you don't need to have fancy teaware or much teaware at all to be drinking some good tea. So,
exactly. Cheers, guys.
Interesting. So it's come back a little bit, right? And now we're getting a little bit more going on. It's lost that sort of fruity sweetness, and now maybe a little bit of that grainy kind of oatmeal-y sweetness, but more creamy.
Yeah.
I'm not really getting. You had mentioned like the fermented fruit thing. I'm not getting that quite as much anymore.
Yeah.
Not particularly floral, but...
And the taste now has become a little bit less sweet, but the aftertaste is still sweet. So it's still sort of lingering in a nice way.
Yeah.
Let's do one last infusion.
Definitely.
And
I'm getting a little bit of... I'm getting sweetness pretty immediately on the tip of my tongue again. So I think the power of this tea, the sort of, train going at 60, or I don't know how fast trains go. Anyway, some of them go really fast. We're not train experts on TeaDB, unless we are.
We're definitely not train experts.
So the full frontal nudity intensity of this tea.
What are we talking about?
is now just don't go with it. We have conditioned them to accept almost anything we can say. Except for we can't make fun of Trump on the show. Come on, a little bit. Right? Like a little bit.
Okay, trigger words.
Yeah, trigger warning. So anyway,
I actually have no idea what Denny's about to say.
No. But the intensity of the tea, it has died off, I think, pretty significantly. We're still seeing really strong liqueur though, so we're still getting lots of flavor too. And liqueur is not always going to be a correlation to the strength of the tea or not, but
right. But
yeah,
it's
still a lot going on.
Good
is the point.
Indicator. Yeah, and we're at the point where you sort of have some wiggle room at how long you can brew this tea,
right?
Because it's no longer. You want to brew it for 20, 30 seconds
right.
at least.
And so for folks out there who really don't know what that means, James, what you mean is that you could maybe reheat the water and brew it for a little bit less time, and the next time you brew it for a little bit longer time, and then you're sort of playing with that combination of time and heat.
And you could transfer this into a device that maybe retains heat a little bit better, like a Yixing pot, and play around with that.
Yeah, and I've seen James do that on the Instagram, TeaDB Instagram. Follow us at TeaDB.org.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Do that.
Yeah. And let's drink this last tea.
All right. Cheers. You know, I actually, before I even tasted it, I had a smell of honey sweetness, and I'm getting that a little bit more. This has been a really wonderful tea to drink.
Yeah. It's interesting. I can't say it's been a terribly typical experience as far as like even just a 10-year-old raw pu'erh. I feel like the tannins are still in there, surprisingly so. And maybe it's a product of the steeping, but yeah, it's quite dynamic. And each steep has sort of been like a different combination of things.
Lots to talk about. It's a treat to enjoy tea like this because it's so dynamic. For you folks out there who are just getting started with tea, maybe it's not the most appropriate tea for you to dive into when you're sort of learning your own palate and these different categories of tea. But for folks who have been following the show for a while, maybe they've been buying a bunch of samples and stuff. Check this out. Is this hard to acquire? Emmett hooked us up.
Yeah, you could. Emmett sells this tea. I don't know the price, frankly, but it's probably about $1 a gram. So this is the Kuzhushan. If you want our characteristic out of focus shot, the 2007 Kuzhushan. How would you describe quick question real fast? How would you describe the storage of this tea? Was it clean? Was it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Very clean. Yeah. And I think that those lighter initial steepings that we had where we were talking about the viscosity being light, I think sometimes some wetter stored tea or some slightly kind of dirtier tea, muskier tea is going to have a little bit more like kind of not gunk, but just stuff going on in those early steepings that can kind of mess up with those high notes.
Right.
And this didn't have it at all. So like I described in the tea, early on, the first few steepings, to me, it was tasting like a young, meant to be drank really early on raw pu'erh.
So this tea has been stored in a way that it's still pretty clean, but it's definitely been aged as well.
100%,
I would say.
Yeah.
So I would agree with what Denny said.
Yeah. So thanks again, Emmett, for hooking us up. If you folks want to learn more about tea in general, James.
Yeah, come check us out at TeaDB.org. I like the way that sounds. I'll say that instead of .org from now on. Go on to YouTube and hit that subscribe button down below. And thank you guys for following. And check out Emmett's Tea as well. We'll
see you guys next time.
Cheers.